Every trader believes they'll see the storm before it hits. Jesse Livermore thought the same until the market reminded him that confidence without discipline is a ticking time bomb. In 1907, when the market collapsed, Jesse was already known as the boy plunger. He'd made and lost fortunes before most traders learned their first chart. But this time, it was different. This time, the world was panicking, and the same public that cheered his success now wanted his head. Imagine sitting there, holding positions worth millions, watching the tape print chaos. Every tick is a test of your sanity. Every breath feels heavier than the last. Would you cut your losses, or would you double down? Comment your thoughts below. This is the moment that shaped Jesse Livermore's most important trading rule. The rule that saved him from total collapse. It wasn't a strategy written on paper. It was a principle forged through failure, humiliation, and the brutal truth of market psychology. Livermore once said, "The stock market is never wrong. Opinions often are." That single line captures the foundation of his survival. He understood that the market doesn't care who you are, how much you've made, or what you think should happen next. The market only rewards those who can stay objective when everyone else loses control. As I look back at that era, I see a man who wasn't just trading stocks, he was trading emotions, mass hysteria, and his own fear. The 1907 panic wasn't just a financial event, it was a psychological battlefield. And on that battlefield, Livermore discovered something that separates the amateurs from the legends. He realized that success wasn't about being right, it was about staying alive. This realization became the secret rule that carried him through every boom and bust that followed. Always protect your capital first. The opportunity will return, but lost capital rarely does. It sounds simple, but in the heat of the market, simplicity disappears. When prices move fast, greed whispers louder than logic, and traders convince themselves that risk equals courage. Livermore knew better. He learned that risk without control is destruction disguised as ambition. Picture this: the ticker tape spitting out numbers like bullets, brokers shouting over one another, rumors flying through Wall Street. Everyone's trying to make sense of the madness, but Jesse sits quietly, focused, calculating. He's not reacting, he's observing. That's where the rule was born, not in profit, but in restraint. This mindset, what he later called financial survival, is the reason Livermore became immortal in trading history. He survived when others went bankrupt. He walked away when others froze in panic. He knew when to stop, when to sit tight, and when to strike. That discipline became his invisible edge. The irony is that traders today still face the same storm. The tools have changed, algorithms, screens, instant data, but the emotions haven't. Fear, greed, impatience, and ego still drive the market more than analysis ever will. Livermore's story isn't a tale from the past. It's a mirror held up to every trader watching this video. So in this film, we're not studying a man who just traded stocks. We're studying a man who mastered himself in the middle of chaos. His rule was not just about protecting money, it was about protecting clarity, protecting decision-making, and protecting the ability to fight another day. Because every trader, at some point, will face that same collapse. The question is, will you have your own rule that saves you? The greatest danger in trading isn't the market itself. It's the voice inside your head, whispering that you're smarter than the market. By the time Jesse Livermore faced the 1907 panic, he had tasted both glory and ruin. He had built fortunes out of thin air, then watched them vanish in a single swing of market sentiment. But the paradox that haunted him wasn't external, it was internal. How could a man who understood the market so deeply still fall victim to his own mind? Every trader knows this paradox. The moment you think you've mastered the market punishes you for it. Confidence turns to arrogance. Patience turns to over. The skill that made you rich becomes the very thing that blinds you. That's what Livermore called the invisible enemy. Not the market, not the other traders, your own certainty. He described it later as a war between reason and impulse. One moment, he could see the truth clearly, the trend, the tape, the turning points. The next, his instincts betrayed him. The pressure of public opinion, the noise of brokers, the lure of easy money, it clouded everything. That was the paradox of Livermore's life. He could read the crowd, but he couldn't always silence it inside his own head. He once said, "The human side of every person is the greatest enemy of the average investor or speculator." Think about that. The enemy isn't a bad stock pick or a wrong forecast. It's emotion. It's the impatience that whispers, "You're missing out." It's the pride that says, you can't be wrong. Every time you listen to that voice, you give away your edge. Modern traders face the same trap. You might have the charts, the data, the strategy, but when your screen lights up in red, your mind switches from logic to survival mode. Your pulse speeds up, your plan disappears, and suddenly you're no longer trading your system, you're trading your emotions. That's the paradox Livermore lived with every day. The more he understood the market, the harder he had to fight himself. Livermore's internal war reached its peak during that panic. He saw opportunity, but he also felt fear. He could sense the market breaking down, but every instinct told him to wait. That hesitation, that small crack in confidence, nearly cost him everything. The market doesn't wait for clarity, it punishes hesitation. Yet, rushing in too early can destroy you just as fast. That was the razor's edge he walked. Imagine that tension, seeing a crash forming, knowing a fortune is within reach, but also knowing that one wrong move could wipe you out. What would you do in that moment? Would you risk it all, or would you protect your capital and wait for confirmation? Comment your thoughts below. This inner conflict is what defines every great trader. It's not about predicting prices, it's about controlling impulses. Livermore learned that discipline is a muscle built through pain. Every mistake he made became a scar that reminded him to wait for alignment between his conviction and the market's behavior. As I reflect on that paradox, I realize something. Every trader wants certainty, but markets don't offer certainty, they offer probabilities. Livermore survived by accepting that truth. He stopped trying to be right and started trying to stay alive. That shift, from prediction to preservation, was the turning point in his evolution. The market doesn't have to beat you. Most traders lose because they beat themselves first. Jesse Livermore called it the disease of the mind. It wasn't greed, it wasn't fear, it was something more subtle, the belief that he could control what could never be controlled. After years of success, after turning thousands into millions, Livermore faced the same trap that destroys traders even today: overconfidence disguised as mastery. In the early 1900s, Livermore's name carried weight. He could move markets with a single order. His judgment had earned him fame and fear across Wall Street. But the more people admired him, the more he began to believe the myth that surrounded him. That belief made him vulnerable, because when the market turned, it didn't care who Jesse Livermore was. It only cared about the numbers on the tape. This is where the psychological trap began. Success creates a false sense of safety. You start thinking you've earned immunity from mistakes. You stop questioning your positions. You stop listening to the tape. You start defending your opinions instead of defending your capital. That's when the collapse begins, not on the chart, but in your mindset. Livermore once said, after a man makes money in the stock market, he feels that he knows it all. That statement wasn't theory, it was confession. He had lived it. He had felt the power of being right and the pain of refusing to admit he was wrong. Each time he broke his own rules, he paid for it with real money and emotional exhaustion. Think about the modern trader sitting in front of multiple screens. One winning trade leads to confidence. 2 winning trades lead to excitement. 10 winning trades lead to blindness. You start believing the market is your friend. You start increasing your position size. You stop using stops. Then, without warning, the market shifts. And just like that, everything you gained starts slipping away. You don't want to sell. You convince yourself it's temporary. You double down. And now you're trapped. That's exactly what happened to Livermore before he created his secret rule. He had ignored his stops, dismissed warning signals, and trusted his instincts too much. The market punished him brutally. Overnight, paper profits became paper losses. He didn't lose because he was wrong about direction. He lost because he refused to cut his losses. Pride made him hold on. Hope made him hesitate. And hesitation is lethal in trading. This was the core problem: ego, the invisible killer of discipline. Livermore realized that ego is always searching for validation, not truth. It doesn't care about probabilities or logic. It only wants to be right. And when that ego takes control, it blinds you to the message that the market is sending. He described that moment as emotional paralysis. The more he lost, the less he could act. Every tick lower made action harder. That paralysis turns a losing trade into a personal identity crisis. You're not just losing money, you're losing. And in that state, rational thinking collapses. What would you do if you saw your account down 50%, but your ego told you to hold? Would you protect what's left, or would you gamble for redemption? Comment your answer below. For Livermore, that moment of pain was transformation. It broke him down but also forced him to rebuild the foundation of his trading philosophy. He realized that success wasn't about conquering the market, it was about conquering himself. The trap wasn't external manipulation, it was internal delusion. He decided to build a rule, not for profits, but for survival, a rule that would protect him from his own worst instincts. He called it his capital preservation rule. From that point on, no matter how confident he felt, he never ignored it, because he understood that trading discipline isn't about perfection, it's about self-respect. Every great trader has a breaking point. For Jesse Livermore, that breaking point became the foundation of his greatest strength. After his losses, Livermore didn't run from the market. He stepped back and studied his own behavior with the same precision he once used to study price movements. He realized that his biggest enemy wasn't volatility or manipulation, it was himself. He wrote later, "It was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was always my sitting." That one line held the essence of his transformation. He began to understand that successful trading wasn't about predicting the next move. It was about controlling the urge to act when you shouldn't. The collapse had taught him that most traders fail because they react to emotion instead of reason. They trade noise instead of signal. He had done the same. His fortune was lost, not because of bad analysis, but because of emotional decisions made in moments of uncertainty. From that pain came clarity. Livermore decided to live by one rule that would override every other instinct: protect capital first, trade later. That rule became his survival code. Before every position, he asked a single question: if I'm wrong, how much can I lose before it breaks me? That question alone saved him from repeating the same mistakes that once destroyed him. He built strict systems around that mindset. He limited exposure. He defined his exit before his entry. He refused to chase. He waited for what he called the perfect alignment, the moment when both the market and his own emotions were calm enough to act. If either was unstable, he stayed out. That discipline, born from destruction, became his new edge. He also changed how he viewed losses. In his earlier years, a loss was an insult. It challenged his identity. After the collapse, he saw losses as tuition payment for knowledge. He said, "Losing money is the least of my troubles. A loss never bothers me after I take it." The key word there is after. The pain disappears when you act decisively. Hesitation keeps it alive. Livermore believed that survival was the true measure of a trader. The market would always give another chance to the disciplined. It never forgave the reckless. That belief gave him the courage to wait through boredom, to ignore the crowd, and to accept that inactivity could be more profitable than constant motion. For modern traders, his lesson remains brutally relevant. Screens flash, alerts ring, algorithms compete for attention. Every click tempts you to trade. But Livermore's philosophy reminds us that the most powerful decision is often not to act. Patience isn't weakness, it's precision in disguise. When he finally returned to trading after his collapse, he did it with this new mindset. No more ego, no more impulse, only process. He waited for the market to prove itself before risking a single dollar, and when that alignment came, he struck with confidence, knowing that his capital was protected by discipline, not hope. His secret rule wasn't glamorous. It wasn't about finding the next big trend or secret indicator. It was about self-preservation, about understanding that longevity is the true currency in this game. He knew the market could make anyone rich for a season, but only discipline could make them last a lifetime. Livermore's perspective changed the way he saw everything: profits, losses, and himself. He understood that a trader's success is not measured by how high he climbs, but by how many times he can survive the fall. That rule, the one that saved him from total collapse, became the foundation of every future success. Every trader wants to win, but only a few learn how to survive losing. That was Jesse Livermore's final revelation, the truth that saved him from total collapse and defined his legacy. When he returned to the market after his breakdown, something had changed. He no longer chased profits, he hunted for clarity. The noise of the crowd no longer pulled him in. The same man who once acted on impulse now waited in silence, letting opportunity come to him. That silence, that patience, became his greatest weapon. Livermore's comeback wasn't instant. It was methodical. Each trade was measured. Each position had a purpose. He applied his rule: protect capital first to every move. When the 1929 crash arrived, The same kind of panic that once destroyed him became his greatest opportunity. While others lost everything, Livermore made millions, not because he predicted the crash, but because he was ready for it. His discipline had finally aligned with his knowledge. He understood that markets would always cycle between euphoria and despair, but discipline was the only constant. He called it the trader's anchor. Without it, every high becomes dangerous, and every low becomes fatal. His success in 1929 was not luck. It was the result of every painful lesson he learned from his earlier collapse. Livermore's life wasn't just a story of wealth, it was a psychological journey. He experienced the extremes of greed, fear, and redemption. Through it all, his rule remained the same. Capital is your lifeblood. Protect it above everything. Once it's gone, every other lesson becomes useless. That rule applies to modern traders as much as it did a century ago. Ask yourself this: when the market turns against you, do you protect your capital, or do you protect your ego? Comment your answer below. That single question separates survivors from casualties. Livermore understood that ego has no place in speculation. The market humbles everyone eventually. The ones who last are those who learn humility before the market forces it on them. As his career matured, Livermore spoke less about methods and more about mindset. He believed that success was 10% strategy and 90% psychology. Charts, systems, and signals could help, but they were meaningless without emotional control. He once wrote, "The game taught me the game, and it didn't spare the rod while teaching." Every loss, every failure, was a lesson that carved wisdom into his mind. His story is a warning and a guide. A warning that unchecked emotion will destroy even the best trader. A guide that shows discipline and patience can outlast chaos. Livermore's secret rule, protect your capital first, was not just about money. It was about clarity, endurance, and respect for the market's power. If you take one lesson from his life, let it be this: the market is bigger than you. You cannot control it, but you can control yourself. And that control is what keeps you in the game long enough to win. When I think about Jesse Livermore's journey, I don't see a man defined by his wealth. I see a man defined by his resilience, a trader who fell, broke, learned, and rose again. His rule wasn't written for glory, it was written for survival. So the next time the market tests you, remember his voice through time: calm, disciplined, unshaken. Protect your capital first. The opportunity will always return. That was his secret rule, and that rule still saves traders today.